You have probably pulled them out of the ground and thrown them away. The ones that push up through your patio cracks, take over your flower beds, and show up uninvited in the lawn every single spring. Most people see weeds and reach for the gloves. What they do not realize is that some of the most documented medicinal plants in human history are growing right outside their door right now, for free. Soldiers packed these plants into open wounds before antibiotics existed. Physicians prescribed them for centuries before clinical trials were invented. And modern researchers keep running studies that arrive at the same conclusion. These plants actually work. Stay with us for the fourth plant on our list. It contains a compound that inflammation researchers describe as one of the most promising natural substances they have tested. And it is probably growing in your lawn right now. Furthermore, the top plant on our list has a research profile so broad that scientists have been studying it continuously for over 40 years across multiple disease categories simultaneously. Here are 11 plants. Let us get started. Stinging nettle is the plant that attacks you first and heals you second. The first thing most people learn about stinging nettle is that it hurts. If you brush against the leaves with bare skin, you feel it within seconds. It is a sharp, burning sting that lingers for hours. That reaction is caused by tiny hollow needles on the leaf surface that inject a mix of formic acid, histamine, and other compounds directly into the skin. This makes what nettle actually does inside the body all the more unexpected. Stinging nettle is one of the most comprehensively studied medicinal plants in Europe, where it never stopped being used as medicine between ancient times and now. The root extract has been studied specifically for benign prostatic hyperplasia, the prostate enlargement that affects a significant portion of men over 50. Multiple controlled trials have found that nettle root measurably reduces urinary symptoms, improving flow, and reducing nighttime trips to the bathroom in ways that researchers describe as clinically meaningful. The leaves tell a different story. They are loaded with quercetin and other flavonoids with well-documented anti-inflammatory effects. Freeze-dried nettle leaf has been studied in randomized trials for seasonal allergies, with results showing it reduces histamine response in a meaningful portion of participants. The irony is not lost on researchers. A plant that injects histamine on contact appears to reduce histamine response when consumed internally. Nutritionally, nettle leaf is extraordinary. It has iron levels comparable to red meat, significant calcium, magnesium, and vitamin K. It also possesses a complete amino acid profile, which is unusual for a plant food. For centuries across Europe, the first nettle growth of spring was harvested specifically because people understood that winter had depleted the body, and this plant could restore it. Blanching the leaves for 30 seconds in boiling water neutralizes the sting completely. From there, you can cook them exactly like spinach, in soups, stews, sautéed in butter, or stirred into eggs. Dried nettle also makes a strong, mineral-rich tea. Plantain is the backyard weed used like medicine for centuries. We are not talking about the banana, but the flat, unremarkable plant with oval-ribbed leaves that grows in every compacted lawn, every gravel path, and every sidewalk crack on the planet. Common plantain has been used medicinally on every continent where it grows, and it grows almost everywhere. When European settlers arrived in North America, it followed their trail so consistently that indigenous nations called it white man's footprint. But here is what that story usually leaves out. Those same nations adopted it into their own medicine quickly. This was not out of curiosity, but because the results were obvious and fast. The leaves contain two compounds, aucubin and actioside, that actively reduce inflammatory signaling, slow minor bleeding, and inhibit bacterial growth. Those mechanisms are now well documented in laboratory research. What makes plantain genuinely remarkable is the speed. If you crush a fresh leaf and press it onto a sting, a bite, or a small cut, the swelling and discomfort ease within minutes. That is not a placebo response. That is active plant chemistry working directly on tissue at a pace that catches people off guard every single time. A 2015 clinical trial found that plantain ointment outperforms standard pharmaceutical treatment on second-degree burns, a result that would turn heads for any botanical preparation. Beyond field first aid, plantain tea made from dried leaves can be used to rinse wounds, and an infused oil can form the base of a skin-healing salve that works across a wide range of conditions. The plant asks nothing from you. It grows in the worst soil, survives foot traffic, and shows up without being planted. Most people spray it with herbicide, but the people who recognize it reach for it the moment something goes wrong with their skin. Yarrow is the battlefield herb that science finally caught up to. Yarrow has one of the longest unbroken medicinal records of any plant on Earth. According to ancient Greek tradition, Achilles used it to treat wounded soldiers during the Trojan War. Whether that is history or mythology, the practical reality is this. Soldiers across cultures carried dried yarrow specifically to pack into wounds for at least 2,000 years. That was not sentiment. It was field medicine that kept people alive. Yarrow contains compounds called achillin that measurably reduce bleeding time by promoting platelet aggregation, the mechanism that forms a clot. Modern laboratory studies have confirmed this is a real biochemical effect, not a folk belief. However, what separates yarrow from most medicinal plants is that it does two distinct things simultaneously. It stops bleeding and promotes tissue repair at the same time. Most plants are good at one or the other, but yarrow does both, which is precisely why battlefield medicine valued it above almost everything else available. The same anti-inflammatory compounds that help close a wound also make yarrow useful as a tea for fever. Traditional use across Europe, Asia, and multiple Native American nations independently centered on yarrow tea as a way to help the body move through fever more efficiently by promoting sweating. That level of cross-cultural convergence on identical uses points toward something real happening in the body. Fresh, crushed leaves pressed directly onto a minor cut can visibly slow bleeding within minutes. Strong yarrow tea can be used topically to wash wounds or taken internally for fever and gut inflammation. For anyone who spends time outdoors, in gardens, on trails, or anywhere away from a medicine cabinet, knowing yarrow on site is practical knowledge with a track record measured in millennia. Dandelion is the lawn enemy that rebuilds your liver. Everything about dandelion's reputation in the modern world is backwards. It is the most aggressively targeted weed in suburban lawn care. Entire product categories exist specifically to eliminate it. And yet, the plant being exterminated is one of the most nutritionally complete and medicinally documented plants growing in the temperate world. Every part of it is usable, and most parts have been studied. For centuries, cultures across Europe, Asia, and North America relied on dandelion not as a nuisance, but as a dependable food source and everyday medicinal plant. The root is where the liver story begins. Dandelion root contains compounds that stimulate bile production and improve bile flow from the gallbladder. This is a mechanism that naturopathic medicine has used for liver and digestive support for centuries, and that laboratory research has now begun to map in detail. Bile flow matters because it is the primary mechanism through which the liver moves processed toxins out of the body. A sluggish gallbladder is a sluggish detox system, and dandelion root addresses that directly. The leaves are a different tool entirely. They act as a natural diuretic, one of the most studied plant-based ones available, without depleting potassium the way pharmaceutical diuretics do. In fact, dandelion leaf replaces the potassium it removes, because the leaves themselves are extraordinarily rich in it. That is a self-correcting mechanism no synthetic drug has managed to replicate. Nutritionally, dandelion leaves outperform most cultivated greens, with more beta-carotene than carrots, more calcium than milk by weight, and significant amounts of iron, vitamin K, and vitamin C. You can roast the roots and brew them as a coffee substitute. Add young leaves to salads in spring when they are least bitter, or dry both to make tea year-round. The plant people spend money to kill has been keeping people healthy since before recorded history. Purslane is the weed with more omega-3s than most fish. This one might genuinely surprise you. Purslane is a low-growing succulent with thick reddish stems, small paddle-shaped leaves, and tiny yellow flowers. It sprawls across garden beds and vegetable patches through the summer, and most gardeners pull it immediately. Researchers studying it have a different reaction entirely. Purslane contains the highest concentration of omega-3 fatty acids ever measured in a land plant, specifically alpha-linolenic acid, the same essential fat found in flaxseed and walnuts, in amounts that researchers describe as exceptional for a leafy green. Some studies have found purslane delivers more omega-3s per gram than many species of fish. That single fact changes the entire story about this plant. Omega-3 fatty acids are foundational to cardiovascular health, brain function, and the management of chronic inflammation, which is the underlying driver behind most modern disease. The populations most deficient in omega-3s are exactly the populations eating the most processed plant-free diets, and the solution has been growing in their gardens uninvited the entire time. Purslane is also rich in melatonin, the compound that regulates sleep, in concentrations higher than most plant foods tested. It contains glutathione, the body's master antioxidant, and meaningful amounts of magnesium, potassium, and vitamin C. Traditional medicine across the Middle East, India, and China uses purslane consistently for inflammation, gut complaints, and as a general cooling and restorative food, all of which align precisely with what the omega-3 and antioxidant content would predict. You can eat it raw in salads, sauté it lightly in olive oil with garlic, or add it to soups. It has a mild, slightly lemony flavor and a satisfying texture. The weed you are pulling out of your garden bed every week is one of the most nutritionally dense plants available. Chickweed is the itch stopper that works faster than most creams. Chickweed looks almost too delicate to do anything. It has thin, sprawling stems, tiny oval leaves, and small white star-shaped flowers that appear almost year-round in mild climates. It grows low to the ground, covers bare soil quickly, and disappears entirely in hot, dry weather. It also has one of the most consistent traditional reputations for skin relief of any common weed, and the chemistry behind it is well worth understanding. Despite its fragile appearance, chickweed has been a staple remedy in folk medicine traditions for generations, especially anywhere soothing skin treatments were needed quickly. Chickweed leaves contain saponins and phytosterols that have documented anti-inflammatory and antipruritic effects, meaning they actively reduce itching at the tissue level. The cooling, soothing effect traditional herbalists observed when applying fresh chickweed to irritated skin is not a placebo. It is a measurable reduction in inflammatory signaling for eczema, psoriasis flares, hives, insect bites, minor burns, and any condition defined by persistent itching and surface inflammation. Chickweed poultice, or infused oil, delivers consistent relief that generations of herbalists and a growing body of botanical research have documented. There is something worth noting about how chickweed works differently from hydrocortisone cream, which is the standard medical recommendation for most of these conditions. Hydrocortisone suppresses immune activity broadly, which helps short-term but causes skin thinning with prolonged use. Chickweed reduces inflammatory activity locally without any of those trade-offs. You can crush fresh leaves and press them directly onto irritated skin for immediate relief. For ongoing use, infuse dried chickweed in a carrier oil for 4 to 6 weeks, strain, and apply as needed. The fresh plant can also be eaten. It has a mild, pleasant flavor and works as a salad green or soup addition. For anyone with chronic skin conditions, this plant is worth knowing before you pull it. Self-Heal is the plant that heals almost everything it touches. The name sounds like marketing, but it is not. Self-Heal, or Prunella vulgaris, earned that name from centuries of consistent observed outcomes across European and Asian herbal traditions simultaneously. Low-growing, with small purple flower spikes and oval leaves, it appears in lawns, meadows, and garden edges from spring through autumn, across the entire northern hemisphere. It was the go-to wound herb of medieval Europe before more exotic botanicals became available. Pressed onto cuts, applied to mouth sores, or brewed for sore throats, the uses were many, and the results were consistent enough to keep the name. Modern research has found something that explains the breadth of that traditional reputation. Self-Heal contains rosmarinic acid, one of the most potently studied antioxidant compounds found in any common plant, alongside ursolic acid with documented antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory effects, and rutin, a flavonoid that strengthens blood vessel walls and reduces capillary fragility. But the research that has genuinely surprised scientists centers on antiviral activity. Laboratory studies have found that self-heal extracts show inhibitory effects against herpes simplex virus, HIV, and influenza, with the proposed mechanism being interference with viral replication at the cellular entry stage. That research is ongoing, but the interest from the scientific community has been serious and sustained. Topically, Self-Heal accelerates wound closure, reduces mouth ulcer healing time in clinical studies, and calms inflamed skin with a speed that explains its ancient reputation. You can brew the fresh or dried herb as a tea for sore throats, mouth sores, and immune support. You can also crush fresh leaves and apply them directly to minor wounds or inflamed skin. The plant is edible, mild, slightly bitter, and useful in soups and salads. A plant called Self-Heal earning that name across unrelated cultures on multiple continents is a signal worth paying attention to. Sheep sorrel is the tangy weed researchers keep coming back to. Sheep sorrel grows in poor acidic soil, thin lawns, disturbed ground, and the edges of paths. It is small and low-growing, with arrow-shaped leaves and reddish flower spikes. Most people who notice it at all think it is a grass, but if you chew a leaf, you know immediately it is not. The sharp, lemony, sour flavor comes from oxalic acid, the same compound in spinach and rhubarb, and it signals a plant with a chemistry worth understanding. That intense tartness is one of the easiest ways to identify the plant in the wild and has made it recognizable in traditional food and medicine for generations. Sheep sorrel is rich in vitamin C and antioxidant compounds, including hyperoside and vitexin, flavonoids that have been studied for anti-inflammatory activity and potential protective effects on the cardiovascular system. However, the research that put sheep sorrel on the radar of oncology scientists is more specific. It is one of 4 plants in the traditional formula called Essiac, developed by Canadian nurse Renée Casey in the early 20th century, based on an Ojibwe herbal tradition, and studied across multiple decades for potential anti-tumor effects. Multiple laboratory studies on sheep sorrel extract specifically have found cytotoxic activity against certain cancer cell lines, meaning compounds in the plant appear to interfere with cancer cell proliferation under controlled conditions. That research does not constitute clinical proof of anything yet, but it has generated serious and sustained scientific attention. As a food, sheep sorrel leaves add a tart, refreshing flavor to salads and soups. Traditional European medicine used it as a cooling food for fever, a mild diuretic, and a digestive aid, all consistent with its antioxidant and mineral profile. A weed growing in your worst soil that cancer researchers have been studying for decades is something most people walk straight past every day. Cleavers is a sticky weed that cleans your lymphatic system. If you have ever walked through a hedgerow and come out covered in small green sticky seeds, that was cleavers. The plant clings to everything: clothing, pet fur, and other plants. It is one of the most universally recognized weeds in the temperate world and one of the most consistently underestimated medicinally. Cleavers, or Galium aperine, has been used as a lymphatic tonic across European, Native American, and Ayurvedic herbal traditions for centuries. The lymphatic system is the body's drainage network, the parallel circulatory system responsible for carrying immune cells, clearing metabolic waste, and moving fluid out of tissues. It operates quietly in the background, but its role in immune function and fluid balance is absolutely essential to overall health. When lymphatic flow is sluggish, the consequences show up as swollen glands, persistent puffiness, chronic low-grade immune issues, and slow recovery from illness. Cleavers acts as a lymphagogue, a substance that stimulates lymphatic movement and drainage. It contains compounds including tannins, flavonoids, and iridoid glycosides that have demonstrated diuretic and anti-inflammatory effects in research, supporting the traditional use of the plant for conditions involving stagnant fluid and congested lymph nodes. Traditional herbalists use cleavers specifically during spring, the season when it is most abundant and most fresh, as a cleansing tonic after the sluggish months of winter. That timing aligns with when the body has had the least physical activity and the highest accumulation of metabolic waste. Cold-pressed juice from the fresh plant is the most potent preparation. You can run the raw stems and leaves through a juicer or blend and strain them. Tea made from the dried herb works, but it is less effective than fresh. For swollen glands that will not clear, persistent water retention, or a lymphatic system that feels stuck, this is the plant traditional medicine reaches for first. Ground elder is the gout remedy that monks planted on purpose. Ground elder is one of the most despised garden weeds in Europe. It spreads aggressively through underground rhizomes, reappears from the smallest fragment of root left in the soil, and once established, is extraordinarily difficult to remove. The reason it is so widespread in Old English and European gardens is the reason people now struggle to eliminate it. Medieval monks planted it there deliberately. Ground elder, or Aegopodium podagraria, was cultivated specifically for its medicinal use in treating gout, the painful inflammatory condition caused by uric acid crystal accumulation in joints. Monks who ate rich diets by the standards of their time were prone to gout, and they grew ground elder precisely because it worked. The plant contains compounds including chlorogenic acid, caffeic acid, and several flavonoids that have shown anti-inflammatory and diuretic effects in laboratory research, consistent with the traditional use of the plant for reducing uric acid buildup and associated joint inflammation. The diuretic action helps clear excess uric acid through the kidneys, which is exactly the mechanism modern pharmaceutical gout treatments use, just through a different chemical pathway. As a food, young ground elder leaves picked in early spring before the plant flowers have a fresh, green, slightly herbal flavor similar to parsley. They can be eaten raw in salads, blanched as a pot herb, added to soups, or dried for tea. After flowering, the leaves become bitter and much less palatable, so the spring harvest window matters. A weed that gardeners spend weeks trying to eradicate was planted by intelligent, medically literate people who understood exactly what they had. The plant did not become a nuisance by accident. It became a nuisance because it is impossible to get rid of. And the reason people planted it in the first place was that it genuinely worked. Creeping Charlie is the most medically researched weed you have never heard of. Creeping Charlie is probably in your lawn right now. It is low to the ground, with small scalloped leaves that have a minty smell when crushed, and tiny purple flowers in spring. It spreads in a dense mat that lawn care companies list alongside dandelion as a primary target for broadleaf herbicide. What those companies do not mention is that this plant has a research profile spanning over 40 years across multiple areas of biomedical science. The primary bioactive compounds in Creeping Charlie, rosmarinic acid, ursolic acid, and a collection of flavonoids including luteolin and apigenin, have been studied for anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, antimicrobial, and neuroprotective effects in a body of published research that would look excessive for a plant that mainstream culture treats as a lawn nuisance. Rosmarinic acid alone has been studied in the context of Alzheimer's disease, specifically for its potential to inhibit the formation of amyloid beta plaques, the protein deposits central to the disease's progression. The research is ongoing, but the mechanism is considered credible enough to sustain continued investigation at serious research institutions. Luteolin has been studied for anti-cancer activity against multiple cell lines, for its effects on neuroinflammation, and as a potential natural compound in allergy management through mast cell stabilization. Traditional European herbalism used Creeping Charlie for exactly what the research suggests it can do: respiratory congestion, sinus inflammation, ear complaints, and as a bitter digestive tonic stimulating bile and enzyme production. Nicholas Culpeper, the 17th-century English herbalist whose work shaped European plant medicine for generations, described it as a general remedy for the whole body. Modern phytochemistry is beginning to understand why he wrote that. You can brew fresh or dried leaves as a tea or add young leaves to salads and soups in spring. The flavor is mildly herbal and slightly bitter, functional rather than unpleasant. The most comprehensively studied weed on this entire list is the one people spray with herbicide every April without a second thought. That gap between what science knows and what the average person believes about the plants at their feet is enormous, and it has been there the whole time. If you made it through this list, your lawn is never going to look the same way again. These were not just random weeds growing between the cracks. They were medicines, survival foods, wound treatments, tonics, and remedies trusted for generations before modern grocery stores and pharmaceutical companies ever existed. 11 plants, all dismissed, all ignored, yet all documented. The knowledge was never lost. It was buried under decades of advertising, perfectly trimmed lawns, chemical weed killers, and a culture that started treating every wild plant like an enemy instead of asking why our ancestors protected them in the first place. And the truth is, some of the most powerful plants on Earth are still growing for free in backyards, sidewalks, empty lots, and fields all around us. People spray them, rip them out, and throw them away, not realizing they may be destroying plants their great-grandparents once relied on to survive. If this journey through the hidden pharmacy in your backyard has changed the way you look at the world beneath your feet, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. We are dedicated to unearthing the history and natural wisdom that modern society has tried to bury. Join us as we rediscover the secrets of the earth and cultivate a better future. Our next exploration into nature's forgotten treasures will be opening soon.